All right, we are live both here on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Welcome everybody. So one of the questions I recently got is that somebody was asking that they wanted to figure out how does that thing actually start to have certain conversations and have those conversations with people that might be a little bit difficult. So what is that we're supposed to be doing when we're having these difficult conversations? Because on the one hand, we want to be able to get our point across. On the other hand, we don't want to feel like a schmata and we feel like everything is just going to be just feeling like garbage because we're trying to do act and actually get something across. So what is it on our end that we can start doing to really prepare ourselves to get our point across to somebody, whether it's a business partner, whether it's in a relationship, without making the other person feel like garbage, that they just want to say, you know what, like I'm done, I'm not dealing with this and whatnot. So I think it's extremely important to understand that there's so many different aspects to this. And we have to realize for ourselves what it is that we're doing. And also on the other hand, what it is that other people are going to be seeing and what it is that our message that we're trying to really get across. So there are a few things I want to share with everybody today. So number one is that we have to understand that, like, where's the fear actually coming from? Like, why is it that this person even had this question of like, hey, I want to get my point across, but on the other hand, like I'm scared about their response. So number one is that we're afraid we're number one going to get rejected, and that's like a totally normal thing. Like people are scared to get rejected. People don't want to get rejected, and people want to feel like, whatever it is that I'm actually doing, I want to feel like I'm actually feeling respected in that way. So it could be that this person who you're about to propose your situation to or your idea to, you've gotten rejected to before. So there's like sort of weight to this conversation. So there's this fear that we're actually scared of getting rejected, which is like a totally normal thing to be fearful of, especially if it's happened in the past. If it hasn't happened in the past, maybe it's happened in other areas. So therefore we feel like, I am not able to do those certain things. And that's why it's extremely important to really understand what it is that we're actually being fearful of. Because if we could start to understand what it is we're being fearful of, then we'll be able to do those certain things that we're looking to really do and get accomplished. So that's number one. Number two is that sometimes I found this with myself personally, especially when I started not working on myself before I started working on myself, is that I felt like I was a people pleaser. So because I was a people pleaser, I was trying to just get everybody to just say yes to me. So therefore, every time I had a situation where somebody was going to say no to me, I was freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, they might be saying no to me. If they're going to say no to me, that is going to be a big issue because I want everyone to say yes, just because like I can't handle the no from other people. Because once again, based on their responses, that's how I define myself. And that's how I really built myself. So if I was able to really understand that and take that and put that on to what it is that I was starting to ask, then I could start to understand why is it I'm so scared to actually have these conversations, even if it's a difficult conversation. And one of the cool things and the ways that I like to really explain difficult conversations or just even just disagreements, but there's nothing wrong about disagreeing. For example, if your favorite color is blue and my favorite color is green, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so you have an opinion and I have an opinion. Like that's totally fine, right? You grew up in New York, so you're a Giants fan, and I grew up in New York. I'm a Giants fan. You grew up in Boston and you're a Patriots fan. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. I might disagree. What am I even disagreeing about? Like I like my team and you like your team. Like that's like a silly thing to disagree about. Like why can't we both have our preferences? And we can start to both have our preferences and to recognize that, okay, you know what, there's something more going on here. That is going to be extremely important to understand. And I think the question that the person asked me of is, how do I not burn the bridge, was more along the line of, hey, you know what, how do I like sort of like get them to like agree with me, right? How can I like use the language in order for them to actually understand what is it I'm looking to do? Because if I could start using the proper language, then I'll be able to do the certain things that I'm actually doing in order to get those results. And if I can get those results, then I'll be able to really understand all the things that I'm really looking to do. So recognizing that on the one hand, yes, it's important that we want to be able to say the right things, and language is extremely important. And if you're in any sales, language is extremely important. My coach and one of my mentors, he always talks about language and how important it is. But understanding if we're coming in because we want to quote unquote like manipulate them to do the things that we're looking to do, then we have to recognize that like, what's the reason for that? Is it the best interest of like the situation that's going on? Or is there more of another underlying theme that's really happening over here? And if we could recognize that, then we can start to really play with the idea of like, why is it that I need this person to agree with me? And why am I so scared of this person? If I'm so scared of this person rejecting me, what's really going on here? And I think it's a very common theme that I see with a lot of people. But before you get into like the practicalities of like what it is you can actually start doing and what tips we can actually start utilizing to try to get our point across without feeling like garbage, we have to also understand that we can't control everybody. Like that's just reality. On the one hand, you can come up with the best strategy, but this person, no matter what, is going to disagree with you. And you have people on the opposite extreme also. People who really love and care about you. You can say the worst things to them, and no matter what, they are going to love you. So recognizing that there are going to be people on both extremes, and if we could really internalize that to say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to please this person, but there is no possible way that I can please them. If I give if I tell them one thing, they're going to want something else. If I say that thing, they're going to want something else. So just recognizing that is going to be so extremely important to realize that there are certain things in our life that we can actually control or actually try to get across to certain people. And there are other things that like we're not able to get across. And if we can't get those things across, then there's nothing we can really do about it. So we shouldn't necessarily feel bad if we're not able to get our point across, or if we're not able to get that person to necessarily agree with us. So understanding those ideas or those fears are extremely important. Understanding that we don't necessarily have control over every certain person. And especially if they get upset, like, to be honest, that's on them. And guess what? If you get upset because they got upset, like, that's on you. No offense. Like, that's something you have to work on and really understand, because emotions are really neutral. And we come into them and we give them a positive or negative feeling. But an emotion is neutral. So if we are going under that assumption, then we have to realize that there's certain things, certain ways we can approach these ideas to recognize, you know what, like, this is something I can control, and this is something that I can control, and realize that we actually have more control over our emotions in general. So instead of being fearful of asking these things, what it is that we can actually do to make sure that we're actually getting our point across. So the four ideas that I want to share with you today in terms of like what it is that we can actually get across is this. So number one is we have to be very good at listening. That is an incredible skill as a coach. It's one of probably the biggest skills you can learn, is understanding and listening, like what they're saying, the other person, and also like what they're not saying. And I think that might be even more important. So, like, for example, like when somebody comes home from work, if I come home from work, I work at home. But like if I would come, at the end of the day, I go to my wife, say, "Hey, how's everything?" And she's like, "Things are good." So, like, okay, on the one hand, it's like, okay, things are amazing, things are great. On the other hand, it's like, wait a second, the tone was definitely down. The word good as opposed to I had an amazing day are very different. So, what's really going on here? And if we could start to recognize that there's a big difference between what it is that we're actually doing and what it is that they're saying and not saying, then we can actually start to figure out and play around with what's really going on here. So, when we start to speak to these people, we start to tell them our ideas, recognize that we have to understand what they're saying and what they're not saying, because maybe they're not going to say something to you up front, or maybe they're not going to say something to you ever, and they're just going to like have it and think about it their whole lives and then never say something to you, right? So recognizing, like, yeah, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to question what it is that they're thinking. Ask them, like, what do you think about this idea? And really start to understand and listen to what it is that they're saying and what it is that they're not saying. And if we can start doing those two things, then we can actually start to become a little more productive in terms of the things that we're looking to do. The next thing, and I think the most important, in my idea, I think is one of the most important things, is to recognize that instead of asking for permission, which most of the times we're looking to do, is we're asking for support. And if you think about that, what's the difference between asking for support versus asking for permission? Is that on the one hand, we're looking to get people to help and to support us in the decision that we want to make. Yes, this decision might affect that person, but recognizing on the other hand that instead of asking permission to do X, Y, and Z, it's, hey, do you mind supporting me in this? And if you ask it like that, it comes across totally different. And if it comes across totally different, then we have to recognize that, like, it's totally fine to be asking for something, because we're not necessarily asking something to get a result. We're asking something to get the support for whatever it is that we're looking to do. And if we can get that support, that is going to be like the best thing ever. So recognizing that, having that support, and realizing that, you know what, this person might disagree with me, and that's okay, but I'm not asking them to agree with me. I'm asking them to support me. If I can ask them to support me, that's a totally different playing field that we can actually start to work on. So realizing the way that we're asking, and that's going to be extremely important. The third idea is to recognize that, you know what, we shouldn't be putting it on them, right? And I would say, if you're trying to get your point across, like, put it on you. Say, like, hey, this is something that, like, I need. This is something that I'm going through. This is something that I think about, that, it's really nothing to do with like what you have to say or did in the past or in the future, whatever it is, but it's something that I'm going to be taking the responsibility on. And we could start taking it on us and saying this is quote unquote my fault for doing this thing, then we'll actually be able to take off the blame on them. Because what really happens is when people start to get upset when we start to tell our opinion, is that they think it's like an attack on them. And if we could take that attack off of them and put it on ourselves, so they're more likely to be involved and be okay with whatever is going on. And that's going to be like the cool part, because we'll be able to realize, you know what, they'll be able to see that it's not really attacking them. It's really more to have that support, or it's really more to say like, hey, it's really on me. And if it's on me, that's nothing to do with you. And this is just something I need to do, is something I need to get across. And if we could do that, then we have to recognize that, okay, that's pretty sweet. And the last part is like, it could be very possible that you say all the right things, you ask for support, you do all the stuff, and like they're still upset with you. But guess what? It might get uncomfortable, and that's normal, and that's totally fine, because sometimes, especially if it's something you're like passionate about or something that you really think is important, so a lot of these things can actually happen because it's something that we realize that it's going to be important to us, and it's realized that for them also it might be something important. And if there's like just a disagreement and there's like some headbutting, like that could be fine, but hopefully the relationship is built on something stronger than just this one decision, and you guys will get over it. So whether it's you need like a half a day or a day to like just to breathe or whatever it is, understanding that it's sometimes like it might just get uncomfortable, and like that's what it is. And like you're saying your opinion and they can disagree, and that's totally fine because they're allowed to have their opinion. But recognize that on the other hand, like even if it does get uncomfortable, like that's totally normal and that's totally fine. So realizing these ideas, I think, is going to be crucially important. So number one is recognize that we have to realize like where's the fear coming from. Is it a fear that they're going to say no, or they might actually say no based on past experience, or just based on our own stuff that's going on in our own head? Are we a people pleaser and we're just trying to just not get into any arguments or disagree because that's something that like we're so used to? So realizing that also could be a big deal. And realize that like, yes, on the one hand, like we want to try to use the techniques to like help us get our point across, but also realize that like the point is to really serve whatever it is that we're looking to serve. Like it's to do the best thing possible. So if we're really coming into it with the good intentions, even if they disagree, then we have to realize like that's going to be something that's going to be helping us move forward. So we can't change people. On the other hand, we have to realize we have to ask for support. We have to listen to what they have to say and what they're not saying. It's realizing it's not on them. Take it and put it on you. And the last but not least, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if it's going to be uncomfortable, that's totally fine. And like sometimes it's just going to be uncomfortable. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. If you have any other ideas, feel free to share them. I'd love to be able to hear it. And hope you're all doing well, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.